So it's lovely to see you all. And yes, we come to the 8th and final week in our course on life with full attention, which is our exploration of perfect mindfulness, the 7th of the 8 stages in the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path that we're exploring this year. And special welcome if you haven't joined us before. So in a moment, I'm going to just briefly give us a recap of the stages of the course that we've been through so far. And then we'll arrive at this evening's exploration, which is Mindfulness and Insight. And I was very keen to do this talk, and then I started writing it or letting it evolve in my heart mind, as these things do, and I realised, oh, perhaps it's one of those cases where fools fly in where angels fear to tread. There's an awful lot you could say, or indeed not say, about insight, and trying to do that in, well, hopefully around about 20 minutes or so. One has to steer a particular course through it, and as you'll see, I've chosen a particular way through. There are many, many different ways this talk could be given, and probably if you asked any of us here tonight to do it, we'd steer a different course. So this is one steering through the territory of this last chapter in Maitreya Bandhu's book, with some extra bits thrown in. So Tim, if we could have the first image, just give us a bit of a recap on where we've been in this journey. If we just look at the left-hand side to start with. So we started with talking about day-to-day mindfulness. Then we looked at body, we looked at feelings, we looked at mind, and we moved on to Dharma's teachings. And in the order of the book, although we switched the next two, there's an exploration of nature and art, mindfulness and other people, and then we arrive at this week, which is insight. And a point that I wanted to pick up that Maitreya Bandhu makes at the end, well, he makes it several times during the book, but once is at the end of the 7th week, is that actually as you move from the 7th to the 8th week, you actually move into the insight perspective, into a transcendental attitude to mindfulness. So you could say, and he does say, it's not necessarily the case. You can practice all the stages that we've been looking at with a transcendental perspective, but with the preceding stages, there can also be a way of practicing them, which is mindfulness, but it's more focused on self, on psychology, is perhaps more the territory of secular mindfulness. And those of you who were here in the first week might remember that I did talk a bit about this distinction between mindfulness as in perfect mindfulness, in the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, and where you travel in a path of secular mindfulness. So I've done a slightly different division just to give you a bit of a flavour, because what happens, there is this progression as you explore these aspects of life with full attention. The body, the feelings, the minds, and the Dharma teachings, they're the traditional 4 categories in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what I've brought in with the, as we move through, that actually, as you move into exploring the teachings, you bring in a broader focus beyond psychology into looking at ethical awareness, looking at karma, skillfulness and unskillfulness. With nature and art, there's the whole exploration of aesthetic experience, which could be involving a transcendental perspective or not. And also other people, as we know from Metta Bhavana, we can wish each other well, we can cultivate metta. That can be a samatha practice or a vipassana practice. It can include more of an insight dimension or not. But with this week's exploration, we're very much moving into this last stage, insight, as Maitreya Bandhu describes it, a transcendental attitude to mindfulness. Yeah. So I did want to say in a moment, I will unpack this word transcendental, which is a very big word, and it has a mixed reception, but I think it has a useful job to do and for us this evening. And it's the word that Maitreya Bandhu uses in connection with insight in this exploration. And what's happening really in this progression that we can see in how we've moving through these stages of perfect mindfulness. Many of us start practicing because we're motivated by the need for personal happiness, to become free from pain ourselves, which is a very valid reason to start practicing. mindfulness. And mindfulness in these first stages can help us to become more happy in our skin, more happy in our world. And that may be as much as we want from it if we're just treating it as a secular practice. At the same time, for others of us, either from the start or perhaps after we've been practicing for a while, there comes a point when we can recognize that actually that isn't enough, and that there's a bigger dimension, there's a truer, deeper, more sustainable, positive experience that lies beyond this smaller sphere. And yeah, I wanted to share with you Maitreya Bandhu's words around this, because I think it's good to just bear it in mind and make this step into this exploration of insight, whether it's tonight or more generally. Yeah, Maitreya Bandhu makes this point that this shift to something beyond self-reference isn't obligatory, and that we do need to be fairly well established both in positive emotion and in what he calls happy concentration. So with a degree of integration and positive emotion before we make the shift beyond this. And another point in the book, he just asks us to bear in mind that if we start investigating our experience in this insight way and we find that we're feeling fearful or we're feeling depressed, well, actually we don't have to keep pushing on, and in fact it can be unhelpful to do so. Actually, we can be really fruitfully practicing these first 7 stages that precede this insight work, which in themselves are creating the essential conditions that are the basis for insight. It needs to be a ripening process, you could say, and we each need to decide for ourselves when it's timely to make that shift. So while I was reading Maitreya Bandhu, I had an image that emerged, which I'm going to share in a bit, which I'm hoping might make this a bit clearer, but we'll see. Anyway, we'll stop screen sharing for now, Tim. Thank you. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this phrase of Maitreya Bandhu's about shifting with insight into what he calls a transcendental attitude or perspective. So transcendental is a word that is used a lot in Buddhism, not by all Buddhists, but it's a word that's very important in terms of Sangharakshita's presentation of the Dharma that we practice within Triratna. And as I said, it can be a difficult word. Its literal meaning, trans, just means across. And the second part, scendental, comes from the Latin scandere, which means to climb. So it's like to climb across. In the dictionary, the meanings offered are to be or to go beyond the usual limits of something, something that cannot be pinned down by words. And I think my favourite definition really is that it's the widest, deepest and highest possible perspective. So it transcends not just in the sense of you rise up above and leave behind everything. It actually means that your perspective gets deeper as well as higher, and it gets broader, so that all experience can be encompassed within a transcendental perspective, but that we don't have to identify with that experience. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. So as I say, while I was reading Maitreya Bandhu, an image came to mind, and I've done some little drawings which are not great art. They're not going to be an aesthetic experience, but hopefully they're a visual aid to your own imagination, because actually working with images in our minds, in our hearts, is a very important aspect of practice, which can really help us, particularly in this territory where we're getting beyond words. And we'll be saying more about that next week, in fact. So the thing about choosing an image is that it will work for some people and not for others. And people with different temperaments see and approach insight in different ways. And in fact, only this morning, I had an email from a friend who'd used a completely different image for very much the same thing I was talking about. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, the image I'm going to share with you in a moment is focused around looking at the image of an egg. My friend had a ball of wool that was unraveling. And yeah, this image of kind of breaking out of an egg is often used. And as I was exploring, I had actually had a lovely time preparing this talk, because I started reading Maitreya Bandhu and it started cooking and the image sort of emerged, and I thought, started exploring from that. And then, there's a sutta of the Buddhas that really resonates with this. There's a poem of Sangharakshita's. It's sort of unfolded. So, as I say, it is an imaginative exploration of our topic tonight. So if we could have the next image, Tim. This is a wonky drawing of an egg in the blue sky. And this is an image which is a metaphor for our experience. So here, this egg is representing our fixed self-view, our identification with or our clinging to a very strongly fixed sense of me or selfhood, which the transcendental perspective is that we might feel like there's this egg, but actually we're in this blue sky of awareness. Awareness is boundless. In fact, we are this blue sky of awareness, but we generally identify with the bit that fits inside the views that we hold, inside this egg of our view. So if we could have the next slide, Tim. So what came to me was actually this egg, it's not perfectly, it's not a rigidly formed shell. All these little lines that I've drawn, they're all like the different views that we put around ourselves, like the layers of a shell. These layers, they form out of craving or hatred or delusion. We try and armor ourselves. We try and keep in what we want. We try and keep out what we don't want. And we exist in this egg of delusion about this boundless blue sky that is all around us. There are different traditional images for this. Another image, very traditional image, is that we are just covered in all these veils, a veil of views and a veil of habits, and that we just wall ourselves off from this expansive, free reality that is symbolized by this blue sky. And we can live pretty much our whole life in this egg in some ways, if that's really what we want to do. There's a lovely phrase from Sangharakshita that describes us living as a fragile ego in a sea of threat. A fragile ego in a sea of threat. So you could imagine this eggshell, and perhaps if the blue was this great ocean and actually we had some deluded, fearful sense of it, then we'd be feeling that we were very fragile in this sea of threat, clinging to what we want, pushing away what we don't want, as I said, ignoring this bigger reality. But actually, even in this case, impermanence will manifest. And I remember on my very first retreat, actually, which was with Maitreya Bandhu in 1993, he was co-leading it. And I remember him saying, if you were to reduce the Dharma to one word, the teachings of the Buddha, you could say impermanence, because actually impermanence will always teach us the Dharma. Nothing stays the same, everything changes. So even though we may do our very best to keep ourselves in this little egg, actually, eventually impermanence will mean that it will change. Indeed, the last words of the Buddha were, all things are impermanent. With mindfulness, strive on. So the egg will break eventually when we die. And actually in the Buddhist tradition, we understand that the views that we've held that have made up that egg, that will determine our experience after death. And we also have another option. We have the option to cultivate insight and to free ourselves consciously from our craving and our aversion and our delusion into this blue sky, and actually to prepare ourselves for death, if that's something that concerns us, by being mindful of impermanence. Impermanence is one of the three marks of conditioned existence, the three lakshanas, and they're three things that we can become aware of in our own experience, which really reveal to us the insubstantiality of this world that we create, the impermanence of it, and how we create the suffering by layering up these views around us and craving to keep things safe inside or pushing to keep things out. So I thought we'd just spend a little bit of time talking about how we might work in and with this egg of our self-view. So if we could have the next slide. So here we're practicing awareness of our bodies and our feelings and our mind, but we're actually doing it all within the confines of that egg, within this smaller perspective of me, and making me myself as this separate, discrete entity that we imagine ourselves to be, making that better, making that okay. It doesn't actually refer outside of that egg of awareness. So as I said earlier, this could be a psychological approach or a secular one, which is endeavouring to make things better on its own level. We can grow calmer, we can grow more positive within that limited sphere without the bigger transcendental perspective. But we have other options. So we can use mindfulness not only to pay attention to what's inside the egg, but if we have the next slide, we can turn our attention to these veils, to these views and habits that make up the shell of the egg. We can mindfully use our awareness, our attention to investigate these layers and to see them for what they are, see that they arise, see that they're not as substantial as we think, see that actually they can change and that we can gradually grow free of them. So that if you look at the arrows on, in case you can't see it, the arrows are pointing just at the inside edges of these views. So it's a bit like kind of tapping away from the inside at the layers that make up this egg that keeps us in this narrow field of awareness. But then sometimes, if we have the next slide, the beak can go right through. We can see through. And this sometimes happens spontaneously. So there'll be like a little something that will just really enable us to see through some of those views, some of those habits into that bigger blue sky. We've talked about that at various points during this course. And last week, I think particularly when we were exploring nature and art, many people had those experiences of something bigger, a more transcendental perspective, even just glimpsed for a moment. And this is what happens. We get a glimpse, and then we might get another glimpse and another glimpse, and gradually those glimpses chip away at those layers of views, and we get more and more of the sky. There's a different image that might be helpful that Sangharaj uses more than once actually, where he says insight comes like lightning flashes. So you could sort of see that as a different way of expressing the same thing, rather than little chinks being made in the egg. It's like sometimes there's this flash of lightning and we do get that sense of a bigger perspective, like a landscape on a dark night, and then we lose it again. But gradually the flashes become more frequent, or gradually, we chip through more parts of the egg. But actually, there's another way that mindfulness can really help us come into relationship skillfully and less painfully with reality. And that is to be, if we're mindful of this bigger perspective, we won't be surprised when reality crashes into our eggshell. So if we have the next slide. Yeah. So we might be fine inside our egg, and then something can crash right in, maybe the death of a loved one, maybe some other shocking, unexpected breach of our sense of the way the world is. I mean, we've all had quite a bit of that this year in different ways, depending on our circumstances. Reality crashing in, impermanence, insubstantiality, just really crashing in and starting to challenge our self-view. Now, if we've got a sense that actually there is more than what we just need to protect in this little egg, then actually we can relax more into that. Doesn't mean necessarily it's going to be a picnic, but it also means we're not going to make it worse by tightening around it and getting more brittle. And indeed, well, we can ask ourselves, are we prepared enough to actually receive that crack in the shell? And there's that famous saying, isn't there, from Leonard Cohen, the crack is where the light gets in. Yeah, the crack can actually open us up to the blue sky, to this open, limitless, free awareness where we don't have to be defended, we don't have to cling, we don't have to grasp. On the other hand, if we have chosen to ignore the fact of this bigger reality, then actually our response to something like this is likely to be to quickly create as many new layers of habit and view, to paper over that crack or layer the eggshell back over that crack, and to just go back to that state of ignorance of the bigger perspective of the blue sky, whether we do that by buying things, by drinking, by eating, whatever our preferred way is to shore up this sense of protecting our fragile ego. So thanks, Tim. We'll stop the screen sharing for a moment. So there's an important point that Maitreya Bandhu brings out in the chapter about this, about insight, which is the crucial importance of Shraddha, or faith, and this wider awareness. So this word Shraddha in Buddhism, it means to place the heart upon. If you've not come across it before, it's always important to know that it's a very different use of the word faith to the idea of blind faith. In Buddhism, we're asked to really explore faith in terms of our reason, our intuition, and our experience. And this is a way that we can really cultivate a confidence in this bigger blue sky, which is our true home, that is actually much vaster, a much bigger space to relax in, to breathe in, to be free in. Yeah, and as I say, Maitreya Bandhu just makes this point that Shraddha, or faith, it's an essential aspect of the positive emotion that we need for insight. He describes Shraddha, or faith, as this intuitive sense of there being more to life beyond the everyday mind. So you could see the egg as being like the everyday mind. He's saying faith gives us this intuitive sense that there's more to life than that. So it is possible from within the egg, from the glimpses that we've had, to cultivate, to be mindful of this blue sky that we've glimpsed. This is a glimpse of the open dimension, the signless, the directionless, these markers of the freedom of reality. And if we're cultivating our faith in those, then we're not going to recoil and make more eggshell. We're actually going to recognize, no, there is something bigger. It's very positive, very, or beyond our current experience, in a way that might not feel familiar, like a pair of old slippers, but actually it's a bigger reality that we can be free within. Having said which, all those layers, the shell of our views and habits, they're there for a reason. They're there because something in us really feels like we need protecting. And we could imagine ourselves like a chick in the egg that will eventually need to grow free of this encasing shell, which can come to feel suffocating. I mean, I remember for myself, when I first came across the Dharma, I had this sense of my life as I'd lived it. It was too small. I remember having that image actually from, I don't know if you've read, I can't remember whether it's Alice in Wonderland or Alice Through the Looking Glass, but anyway, whichever one it is, you know, when she gets too big. And I remember just feeling, actually I'd grown too big for my life. I'd made too small a life for myself. So I think that's probably why I resonate with this image of the egg, that actually there's more of me and it wants to be able to expand, express itself, live life with full attention, to full reality. And in order to do that, you know, if you smash the egg when the chick's really tiny, well, it's really going to struggle, isn't it? And it may not die, but actually probably, in the metaphor we're using, probably just would recreate the egg again very quickly. So there's something about how we really need to grow the resilience, and if you like, the spiritual muscle. It's a funny phrase, but I think it's really worth reflecting on. The spiritual muscle to be able to let ourselves transform into what Maitreya Bandhu calls a new species of consciousness. A new species of consciousness. That's how he describes insight. you like, to use the metaphor of spiritual rebirth, to be spiritually reborn into the clear blue sky. So we're letting go of what was in the egg and transforming into something more that has its home in the blue sky. And ultimately, we can realize that the blue sky is actually our own deepest, truest nature, in a way that we're made of sky, we're made of awareness. It's not something separate to us. But I'm wanting to explore it this evening in terms of how we evolve by stages. And let's for now just stay with this image of emerging from the egg. So as I was saying earlier, I was playing with this unfoldment, this image of unfolding. This talk was cooking over the last couple of weeks in my heart mind. And I was thinking, oh yes, to step out, to be free of the egg. Well, what do birds need? Well, they need wings, don't they? That's how birds survive in the sky. They have wings. And of course, there's this very famous teaching of the Buddha on the wings of enlightenment. It actually uses this word, the Bodhipaksha Dharmas, that means wings of enlightenment. So I think, as Sangha has taught us, it's always good to weave back our Dharma reflections to the original words of the Buddha. So I went back to the Pali Canon and I found found out what the 37 wings were. We're not going to look at all of them, and we don't need to develop them all right away. But if we could have the next slide, we'll actually discover that we've been working on them already. So the first 4 of the 37 wings are none other than these 4 foundations of mindfulness that we've been exploring on this course. And in fact, the last 8 of them are those stages of the Eightfold Path that we've been working through all year. So we're actually already very fully engaged with exploring 12 of these wings of enlightenment. And in the middle, I particularly wanted to draw our attention to the 2 5s, because actually those 2 5s, they're the same list, and they're the spiritual faculties. And these are really interesting. They're a really central original teaching of the Buddha that's got a lot of I was going to say a lot of mileage, which is a bit of a funny word to use. Sangha actually talks about them a lot because they have many helpful things in them that we can explore to support us with our spiritual lives. And in fact, we're hoping we might be exploring these more next year. So if we could have the next slide. So these 5 spiritual faculties you can arrange. They have in this pattern, which for those of you who are familiar is a mandala pattern, and always mindfulness is in the center. So it is absolutely central. Mindfulness is a central faculty in terms of developing these wings. But there are other faculties as well. There's the development of wisdom. And in a way, as a kind of counterbalance to that, there's the development of faith. They are often seen as a complementary pair. And then the north-south pole, if you like, we've got energy, which is very much that sort of sense of an outward flowing energy. And we've also got samadhi, which is much more of a sense of, I want to say, concentrated energy. We're gathering ourselves in what Maitreya Bandha calls meditation proper. Absorption is another word for samadhi. It's an interesting word to unpack, and I'm going to be doing more of that next week. But there are these different ways, different faculties that we can develop. And they're spiritual faculties when we're in the process of developing them, but when we've developed them, or if we have them to some extent naturally, they're powers, they're already realized. So these 2 lists are actually the same things. One is us developing them as a faculty, the other one's them already existing or having been developed. So the reason I've shared these is because I think an very, very important aspect of Bhante Sangharakshita's teaching for us is to recognize that we have different ways of practicing, of going for refuge, different ways to break out of the egg. We all have different temperaments. Some people free themselves by faith, like Pingia did, for those who are familiar with Pingia. Some people free themselves by wisdom. Some people through deep, deep, deep meditation. some much more by energy work in different ways, and altruistic activity, ethical activity. So we each need to find our own way to break out of the egg using the faculties we have available. And all of us need all of the faculties, and mindfulness is the central one that really balances all of them. So that's just a little flavour of one of the ways that we can develop our wings. Thanks, Tim. We'll stop screen sharing for a minute. And this image of using the faculties to break out of the egg brought to mind a lovely passage, one of my favourite passages from one of Sangharakshita's books on Milarepa. And he's talking about these different faculties, and he likens us to animals. And he says, yeah, we're like different animals. Yeah, and he says, you just have to make use of whatever faculties you've got. If you've got thinking, make use of thinking. If you've got intuition and feeling, make use of those. Be like an animal that finds itself in a difficult situation. If it's got a beak, it will use its beak. If it's got claws, it will use its claws. If it's got wings, it will use its wings. Use whatever faculties you have. So, yeah, part of the invitation this evening is for you to become aware of what faculty do you think is going to most help you to get out of that egg, if that's what you want to do, and it's a choice, if you do want to try and do that. And as I mentioned, I looked up this sutta where the Buddha talks about the 37 wings of enlightenment. And actually in this sutta, he's got this lovely, rather endearing image of a hen sitting on her eggs. And there's a really lovely teaching in this. So I just wanted to read you this little snippet of the Buddha talking about this hen sitting on her eggs and the wings of enlightenment. So he says, this is the Buddha, suppose there were a hen with 8, 10 or 12 eggs that she had not properly covered, incubated and nurtured. Even though she might form the wish, may my chicks pierce through their shells with the points of their claws or beaks and hatch safely. Yet the chicks are incapable of doing so. For what reason? Because the hen had not properly covered, incubated and nurtured her eggs. And he went on, the Buddha. So too, when a bhikkhu, a monk, is not intent on development, even though he forms the wish, may my mind be liberated, yet his mind is not liberated because he lacks development. He lacks development of what? Of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, of the 4 right efforts, of the 4 iddhipadas, of the 5 spiritual faculties, of the 5 powers, of the 7 factors of enlightenment, and of the Noble Eightfold Path, all of which add up to the 37 wings. And the Buddha goes on to say that even if the hen or the bhikkhu hasn't actually formed the wish to break out of the shell or to be liberated, actually, if they're cultivating those 37 wings, that will happen anyway, naturally. It will be the natural unfoldment of practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 5 spiritual faculties, the Eightfold Path, those other lists, that will unfold. So we're nearly at the end now. I wanted to give a quick recap and also to share a poem with you. So the culmination of this 8-week exploration of mindfulness, life with full attention, is to bring all of the mindfulness, our full attention to bear on the nature of reality, if we wish to do so, and if we're ready to do that and we think that's what it's time for. We can full attention, attend to this transcendental perspective, which is to say the widest, deepest, highest perspective there is, that is free from the ego clinging that keeps us in this little egg. And this perspective, it encompasses everything, this transcendental perspective. And at the same time, it sees through and beyond everything, realizing and becoming one with this open dimension, the signless, directionless, clear blue sky as the eggshell falls away. So we've just got 2 more slides. Could have the next one, Tim. So this is a suggestion of what happens when these views and veils, these layers of views and habits start to give way, start to loosen into the blue sky. And then if we can have the last image, I wanted to share with you a poem by Sangharakshita, which some of you might have heard on Friday actually, but it's always good to hear these things more than once. And it's Sangharakshita's poem, Secret Wings. We cry that we're weak, although we will not stir our secret wings. The world is dark because we are blind to the starriness of things. We pluck our rainbow-tinted plumes, and with their heaven-born beauty, try to fledge nocturnal shafts, and then complain, alas, we cannot fly. We mutter, all is dust, or else with mocking words accost the wise. Show us the sun that shines beyond the veil, and then we close our eyes. To powers above and powers beneath, in quest of truth, men sue for aid, who stand athwart the light and fear the shadows that themselves had made. Oh, cry no more that you are weak, but stir and spread your secret wings, and say, the world is bright, because we glimpse the starriness of things. Soar with your rainbow plumes, and reach that near far land where all are one, where beauty's face is eye unveiled, and every star shall be a sun. Thanks, Tim. So what we're going to do in a moment is we'll have a period of meditation. I'll lead us in meditation to absorb that. And after that, we'll have a break and head into groups to explore our response to this image, this idea of being encased in this eggshell of views and habits. And for you to think as we come to the end of this course, what's it time for you? What intention do you want to make going forwards? I'll remind us of these questions before we go into the groups. And yeah, we'll just take a minute or two, however long you need, to get comfortable for a led meditation. So if you're sitting comfortably, then we'll begin. And if you're not sitting comfortably, do whatever you need to do to be sitting comfortably. The first foundation of mindfulness is the mindfulness of the body. We all have a body, and it's always the place to start. We need to give the body whatever conditions it needs. To be able to be aligned, to relax, to connect with the earth. Really to feel that connection with the ground that we all share, that we share with the Buddha, everybody who's ever meditated. We can really let ourselves let go into the support of the earth. However much we let go, the earth can take it. We can give our full weight to the earth. And we can allow our bodies to breathe as naturally and freely as they wish. Really allowing all of our awareness, all of our attention to come into the body, into whatever sensations are there. Just noticing where is our attention drawn. Noticing the effect of the in-breath and the out-breath on that felt sense of the body. And allowing ourselves, allowing our attention to rest on the outer edges of our sense of the body. At the edges of that body we think of as me, meet the world that we think of as that and well. Just allowing ourselves to investigate where that boundary feels strongest, thickest, most resistant. Is that where the tension is in our bodies? Is that where we're holding on, making more eggshell? Gently allowing ourselves to breathe in to wherever we're feeling that tension. And with the out-breath, Just allowing that tension to soften. Being mindful of any tiny subtle sensations that arise as we let go. Those tiny sensations can be like the bubbles in lemonade as our bodies relax. You could think of them as little pinpricks in that eggshell, letting the light come in. Gently using the breath to explore this mind-made boundary between ourselves and the world. Noticing that it's changing each time, each breath. It's impermanent, it's not fixed. With our awareness, our full attention, with our mindfulness, we can become aware of this boundary. We can become aware of it changing, aware of those holdings, that tension, relaxing, letting go. That hard shell softening, dissolving. There is nothing to defend. There is nothing to defend. Only armor to be dropped and to stand there naked and free. There is nothing to defend. The ball of habits can be unraveled like a ball of wool. There is nothing to defend. I am part of the great no thing, the flow of life that cannot be fixed. There is nothing to defend. We are in it together. All that is left to take each other's hand and dance, the music that connects us all.